And welcome back to the second half of the show this morning. And we have been observing the 16 days of activism of no violence against, I should say, women, children and men, boy children and men, because abuse doesn't only happen to women and girl children. It happens right across the board. So it really should be 16 days of violence against all genders. And that's what we're going to focus on this morning in the show with John Smith. He's from an organization called Transformation Through Knowledge. He's a life coach and also a recovery coach. So let's first unpack that, and then we'll talk about abuse and what you can do, how you go about blowing the whistle on abuse of any form in your immediate vicinity. John Smith, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Morning. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you for being with us on the show this morning and to share all of your knowledge and expertise and the horrors of abuse against women, children, boy children, girl children, and men as well. But before we get there, let's talk about your role. Firstly, TTK, what is it all about? That's your company. And then I want to look at the difference between a life coach and a recovery coach.
Well, as you said, TTK stands for Transformation Through Knowledge, and I don't believe we can change in any way, shape or form unless we acquire more knowledge, particularly about the problem that we may be facing. And I started the program of practice about 10 years ago, just as an idea that came up in my mind when I started my own personal journey of recovery. And I realized there were so many things I did not understand about myself, know about myself, let alone about life. So it sort of evolved over the years. And then I did some training. I'm a former high school teacher, and I was also a school counselor. And then I did some training in life coaching. And life coaching essentially is assisting individuals to move from what we call the default position that they're at, to a place of dissatisfaction, problems, as the old saying goes, being sick and tired of being sick and tired. And we take them through a process to figure out what else do they want to experience instead of what they've got, where they're at. And then to develop some strategies how to get from A to B. And of course, that's a lifelong process. It doesn't mean we meet with the client for the rest of their lives, but we sort of introduce certain concepts, certain basic principles, because life really revolves around principles. And if we understand some of those principles, we learn how to implement them, we can start to live life on life's terms, as we call it. And then recovery coaching is a similar process, but obviously it focuses on people who deal with substance abuse or any kind of addictive, obsessive, compulsive behaviors. And for the most part, recovery coaching would work with people who maybe realize they've got a problem with, as I say, either substance abuse or behavioral obsessions, and also for those who've gone through a basic treatment program wanting to move on with their lives. So the focus is not so much on the addict in treatment as such, although I do work in treatment facilities because I've also got a counseling background. I've done some training in counseling. But the two are complementary, but one focuses more on basic life strategies, whereas the other one focuses on helping the addict who is struggling with substance abuse to understand what some of the underlying factors were, how to work through the addiction, and then how to move on with life at the end of the day.
It must be very difficult. You have come from a very abusive background yourself. How do you deal with these very abusive situations, or people that have been so traumatized and abused throughout their lives? How do you deal with them?
The vast majority of the addicts that I work with in and out of treatment, well, I shouldn't say the vast majority, many of them I should say, have experienced some form of abuse during childhood, whether it be physical, emotional, and even sexual. And I just want to put into contact with me coming from an abusive background, it wasn't violent. It wasn't physically or emotionally abusive. There's a lot of emotional neglect more than anything else. Mm-hmm. And I just want to clarify, I'm not here to put anybody in a bad light. I'm just here to tell my story. Mm-hmm. And my story is part of my ongoing recovery, and also hopefully somebody will hear something I said will give them some hope.
How old were you when you realized that you're being abused, that what is happening in this relationship is just not right, and how did it impact on you?
I always had a feeling from the age of about 5 or 6 when it happened that there was something wrong with me. Something about me was different. And I always said to people, the behavior that a lot of addicts develop during active addiction, I had these behaviors from the age of 6, 7, 8.
Sure.
Shoplifting, compulsive lying, emotional outbursts, just very dysfunctional. And as I say, always the feeling there was something wrong with me. And I always had, not vivid memories, but somewhere along the line I had memories of certain things that happened. But I grew up, as I say, in a very emotionally detached environment, very little shows or displays of affection. So, and of course, certain topics would never be discussed. It never crossed your mind to even mention that. And also with a young child, a child internalizes. Now, the child's brain is not developed enough to understand, to be rational about it and objective. So, the child internalizes, and at some level, as I say, there's the internalization. Something happened, and there's something wrong with me. But at the same time, it's not easy to put your finger on it, because...
And you thought the problem was with you, within yourself.
With me,
you didn't
yes.
realize that who was the person that was abusing you?
It was somebody that I knew very well, just for the sake of family.
Not your parents?
No, not my parents, not my parents.
Normally when children are subject to abuse, be it physical, mental, emotional, whatever it is said that it's always people in their immediate vicinity, in their very close circle.
Yes.
And people often think that if a child is abused, it's really outside of their circles.
It's far more common in the circles because of the trust factor. An outside person would need to take quite a long time to build that kind of trust with the child as possible. But somebody whom the child already trusts, whether it be a family member or close friend, of course, it makes it much easier for the perpetrator. And that is really also, as Brett mentioned, at a psychological level, the impact that kind of experience can have, the trust and the confusion. And a child's values and morals are virtually non-existent. To some extent, they're still being internalized, they're still being developed. And then you're taught certain things in your home, what is right or wrong, and then that kind of experience is just extremely confusing. And you ask the question, when did I realize it was a problem? I had these dysfunctional behaviors throughout my life, really, and I was bullied at school, very low self-worth, self-image. But it was only when I got married. This is about 20, I'll just put in the picture briefly. More than 20 years ago, my wife and I were going through a tough patch. And in hindsight, I understand where it sort of came from, because I was not able to show emotions, really. I was emotionally detached. You're caught up in a victim mentality unconsciously, where everybody needs to understand where you're at. They need to feel sorry for you. They've got to make you feel better. And at that time, it was very traumatic for me, but I'm grateful today. My wife said, you either get some help or it's the end of our marriage. And I went to see a therapist, but I was very closed, and I'd also done a background in counseling, so you sort of learn to know how to answer certain questions.
You answer what they want to hear.
I answer what they want to hear. But to cut a long story short, somewhere on the line, the counsellor started suspecting something was wrong, and what it was. So she lent my wife a book on childhood sexual abuse. And if I remember correctly, she said, don't give it to him, leave it on the table, let him find it and sort of page through it. And that is what happened. And even thinking about it now, my body still reacts when I looked at this book and paged through it, the rage I felt inside of me. The flashbacks, the anger, the emotional turmoil that my wife witnessed, which was sort of the realization there was something far more here that I'd realized the impact on an emotional, psychological, and even developmental level, for that matter. As
you were growing up and you realized that this person is your abuser, have you ever tried to distance yourself from that person? Question number one. And number two, have you ever approached the person directly or indirectly and try to find out why me? Why did you pick on me to do this to me? You've destroyed my life, or nearly destroyed my life. I guess you're one of the lucky ones, because obviously it is said, statistics tells us that abused children go on to become delinquents themselves.
Absolutely.
A lot of them end up becoming drug addicts, yes, or abusers themselves. Yes. And you definitely were one of the lucky ones. So why were you lucky? What is it that happened differently in your life that you're sitting here today talking to me and trying to heal other lives?
If I can just put into context, I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm one of the lucky ones that I never became a full-blown street addict lying in the streets with a needle. I never became a physical abuser as such, but the emotional and mental abuse that I perpetrated on my family in particular, my wife and my son in particular. And even when I was younger towards some of my siblings for that matter. And then I also developed a whole lot of obsessive compulsive addictive behaviors as well. But
For
fortunately
example?
not to, I remember a time I would only drink alcohol for the purpose of getting drunk. I would abuse painkillers. I remember
Was that to blot out all the painful memories?
in hindsight, realizing it now, I would take painkillers at one stage because I had pain, because I suffered from chronic headaches and chronic backache. And then I would take painkillers in case I had pain, and then I would take painkillers just because it felt good, and sleeping medication. And this is what comes to mind. My mother-in-law was a registered nurse, and she commented to one day about the sleeping medication, how dangerous it is. And there's something in me just rebelled against that. So the point I'm trying to make, I did go through a lot of those behaviors, but fortunately not to the extent where I lost complete control, which I'm really grateful for. Coming back to my abuser, and this is difficult for me talking about this because there are more family members who don't know about this than those who do know. People that are very close to me, my wife and my immediate family know about this, and I've shared some of it in some of the talks and events that I do. Obviously, as a child, as I said earlier on, you don't really realize how problematic it is, how severe it is, until this particular situation occurred about 25 years ago. And now I never addressed it with the individual, and this individual actually committed suicide a number of years ago. So, and it was sort of shortly before I started my own real journey of recovery. So there was never any real resolution being able to address it, or even tell the people who may have known about it or did not know about it, or who knew the person. I never got to the stage of addressing any of that. So my healing just came with this realization of what had happened, and my interest in the fact that the more I can learn to understand about myself, about my past, I can learn to develop certain tools to cope. So my training in life coaching and recovery coaching, first of all, was very therapeutic for me personally. And even now, as part of my ongoing healing process, I still attend support groups. I still see a counsellor.
Up to today?
Up until today, and it probably will be for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. You indicated that you are in a support group and you will be for the rest of your life. What does that support group do for you? What do you believe will happen or not happen in your life if you stop going to the support group? And I know lots of recovering addicts don't like to attend support groups, yes. And I wonder why is that? So 2 questions to you.
Well, initially my idea of a support group was where a lot of losers get together to commiserate with each other. And I think somehow that's the idea people have. But a support group is where a group of people get together who have had similar experiences, and they can support each other. And I can share something I'm going through that maybe nobody else can really understand unless they've been through it. And we can give each other input. And it's also that sense of fellowship. There's a sense of camaraderie. And really, there's such a positive energy. I shared with my wife, I went to a group on Tuesday night, and I shared with her afterwards just the authenticity that comes out in a group like that, where people just share their very being, and there's no judgment, there's no questioning for that matter, and it's a safe environment. And for me personally, it's become such a part of my life. I facilitate the one group, and then I try and attend others as well, as often as I can. And it's got to the stage where I can't remember, I can't imagine not having that kind of support.
It's a huge part of your life.
It's a huge part of my life.
And it definitely does give you support.
Hugely.
Okay, let's hold that thought. We need to pay the rent. I'm talking to John Smith. He's from a company called Transformation Through Knowledge. He is a life and recovery coach, and he's also a counsellor. He works at a couple of facilities in and around Johannesburg, drug rehab facilities. And of course, he does help voluntarily as well with other groups. So if you have any questions or comments, he's more than happy to take your calls on the open line, of course, which is 011 086 7777. Pardon, 086. I think I've got that number wrong. It's 086 7786 is the right number. There you have it. Let's pay the rent. Okay, I've just been corrected by the production team. The correct studio number is 011 086 7777, and that's the number you call us on. We're waiting to hear from you. I'm talking to John Smith from Transformation Through Knowledge. It is the 16 Days of Activism, and we're talking to him particularly because not only is he a life coach, he's also a recovery coach, and he himself was a victim of abuse from a very tender age of 5 years onwards. John, when did your abuse stop?
So around about the age of 6, when sort of the individual moved out of my environment, put it that way.
So it was only for a year?
But 2 years.
2 years, but it scarred you for life.
I want to read something, if I may.
Please go ahead.
On that point of scarring for life, because some people might think, well, it's so many years ago, why don't you just get over it and move on? Mm-hmm. And as I intimated earlier on, a child's brain is not developed enough, the child internalizes. And there's a study that's been going on for a number of years on the adverse childhood experience study. And I just want to read a quote. The more adverse childhood experience a person reported, the higher the risk of experiencing poor psychological and physical health later, because it remains internalized. And also, and by the way, I used to consider myself a victim. I consider myself a survivor now.
That's wonderful.
I was a victim for most of my life.
Congrats.
But I'm fortunate in that I have had family support with that as well. There's a lot of shame. I thought no one would understand this. The shame always comes back to me. Was it my fault? And I just want to read just a couple of things another person said as well.
And just to stop you there, when you talk about shame, often the victims think that it's my fault, I encouraged him or her to perpetrate whatever it is, and kind of carry that guilt with them because they feel it's my fault, I encouraged it.
Yes, and also there was something wrong with me that the person chose me to do whatever it was to me and not to anybody else.
So then you in your childlike mind, you're telling yourself, I must be special for him or her to do that to me.
Either special or, in my case, it wasn't that I felt special. There was something wrong. There was something that he didn't need to do to anybody else. Almost I deserved it at some level, yes. Now this person's saying it ruined everything. My self-identity is sad, melancholic, shy, retiring and angry, never content or at peace. It has hampered me all my working life. Problems with relationships with the opposite sex my whole life made me think something was wrong with me. I will never know the person I could have become. And those are sort of the conscious or unconscious thought patterns that sort of go through the person's mind, if it remains unresolved.
Now, you've told me that you're in a support group, and those experiences at a tender age of 5 and 6 onwards shaped you and shaped your life to where you are today. You've decided not to become a victim. You've actually turned things around for yourself. It took you many years, but you've eventually come to the turning point, and you're touching other lives very, very positively. What about other people who are not able to do it? Why are they stuck in that space? Why can they not move forward?
It's such a powerful and difficult question. Some people just are ready and some are not. And if they're not ready, it could be the shame that they feel they can't come forward. They might see it as a weakness to ask for help. They might think, well, they should just get over it and move on with their lives. And if they're not ready, they're not ready. And all we can do, if we know about such a person who's not ready, just offer them that continued support and ear. But the person has to make the decision to actually, well, the most difficult thing is to take responsibility.
I asked you about closure during the ad break, and you said to me that there's no such thing as closure. It's very loosely, it's a term very loosely used. Can you expand on that, please?
I think some people confuse closure with they think closure means I just put it aside and I move on. That's denial. And what happens in denial is whatever we've been trying to deal with remains suppressed. Closure, as I said earlier on, to me starts with taking responsibility. And I don't mean take responsibility for what happened to me. Take responsibility for where I am now. What can I do moving forward? And then that whole idea, I can ask for help, I can get the support that is necessary. For me personally, because I was never able to address the individual, closure for me was, I got to the stage, as I said earlier on, being sick and tired of being sick and tired, running the risk of losing my family, my son not wanting to have anything to do with me anymore, and just all the things I could lose. And then the opposite of that is what I could maintain if I took responsibility for it. So the closure for me came more in there's a sense of hope. I can move on. The memories, it's more, and I think Brett also referred to it, it's more the emotions that remain attached to those memories can become diffused over time as you start to change your story about what happened. You start to change the way you look at what happened, and you start to look more into the future moving forward, what there is for you to can achieve. And I just want to touch on what you said, the impact that it can have on your life when you start to move forward. I've had this experience a number of times this year, particularly in treatment facilities, sitting with, at various times with a young drug addict. And interestingly, in my personal experience, those who suffered some sexual abuse were more inclined towards alcohol or heroin, the suppressants in other words, because they numb the pain. And on a few occasions, and the one was about 2 months ago, looked at me with quite tearful. When I felt it was the right thing for me to share some of my experience. He said, "This is the first time that anybody is hearing me." Now, I can't begin to describe how that made me feel. It's not about me that instance, but that I was able to take something that happened to me that had caused so much shame and guilt and dysfunction in my own life and make somebody else feel I get where he's at. I'll never say to a person, "I know how you feel." That to me, that's arrogant. But I can understand what you are feeling. So the meaning that it brings into your own personal pain, the pain does get less. I can think back of a lot of things in my life. I don't feel the intense pain anymore, but it will be very easy to relapse back into that.
If you should meet your perpetrator again, if you had the opportunity to sit down and talk with him and explain to him or let him know just how he damaged you, would you do it? What would you say to him?
If I had the opportunity, I would probably, I say probably because I want to be honest with myself. And the only reason why I would do that is for my own release. And one of the things I teach people in my sessions, and which I'm trying to apply myself, is just share with the person how it made me feel, the impact that it had on me.
You're not angry at him? You don't want to beat up on him?
I don't feel anger at this stage. Anger very often is a secondary emotion. Now, the anger we feel is because we're trying to mask hurt or disappointment or shame. So I think because over the years I've been able to deal with some of those underlying emotions, the anger is, I don't feel anger anymore. I think I can be.
Have you forgiven him?
I have forgiven him because I needed to forgive him. I did a group session last night at a facility, and I said to the group, because we spoke about forgiveness, and I said that forgiveness has got nothing to do with the other person. It's all about me.
Yourself.
So from that context, yes, I think I can be honest with myself and say I have forgiven.
John, what about a child that's been abused? Is his or her EQ damaged in any way? EQ and IQ for that matter.
The impact is on a psychological level, emotional level, cognitive level, social level. And I just want to say a few things about EQ. My understanding of EQ in simplistic terms is the balance between my emotions and my rationale. An immature person will be somebody who's driven by the emotions without bringing rational thought into it. And very often unresolved trauma definitely has an impact on EQ, where the emotions that are associated with those memories can get triggered at the most unexpected, inopportune times. It could be somebody's facial expressions, tone of voice, and then they react from an emotional point of view, and that's definitely a link to trauma, a particularly early childhood trauma, where the confusion about the child's identity comes in, for that matter. Intelligence, I personally don't believe in intelligence. I don't believe in IQ personally. I believe each of us has got potential that we develop according to what we are good at or what we are supposed to do with our lives. Yes, that can definitely be affected, because a child's self-worth can be affected by that. I battled at school. I had a teacher when I was, I think, about 9 years old, in whatever grade I was in. I remember this vividly, looking at me and saying, John, you look just like an idiot with your mouth open like that. I was sitting with my mouth open, but she just reiterated, I felt worthless, I felt like an idiot. And as I said, I was bullied at school, so I had a very low self-worth. And somewhere along the line in high school, I don't know what happened, but I made the switch. I can actually study. And then my academic performance increased, or improved, I should say. But definitely it can have an impact on the so-called IQ and EQ, definitely.
So you're one of the lucky ones. I wouldn't say few lucky ones. Please God, there are many like you out there who have reclaimed their lives. As we speak, we do know that in the UK, the child sexual abuse soccer scandal is unfolding there. How does that make you feel, and what do you think about that situation?
It evokes a lot of sadness. And I think it's the empathy coming in, knowing what a lot of those people will experience or have experienced if they're adults. And what I've also got to deal with sometimes is a sense of helplessness. In the work that I do, and I think my peers who do this kind of work also experience sometimes, it's almost like we're fighting a losing battle. There are so many hurting, broken people, and so few ask for help. And I just always remind myself of the starfish principle. And if you know the starfish principle, just throw one starfish back in the sea, I've made a difference to that one.
Just to that one.
To that one.
But you made a difference.
Could make a difference into others as a result of that. Yes.
Exactly. Yes. Let's look at the abused child growing up. You know, let's look at the different. We spoke often. Abused children become abusers themselves, and if they don't become abusers, then they end up becoming drug addicts or alcoholics. That's not always true, is it?
No, not always.
You do have people who grow up who were not exposed, who were not abused, but they end up becoming addicts, abusers,
Yes.
etc. Why is it? What has gone wrong in their lives that they've chosen that wrong path?
To me personally, I always go back to that sense of identity, who I am. And there's a neuroscientist called Mark Waldman who does a talk on the fact that I think research shows that each person is born with basic hardwiring in the brain, certain predispositions that is part of their identity. And well-meaning parents, I'm a parent, I was never given a manual how to train my child. So well-meaning parents maybe raise a child with different values from what may be inherent to the child's personal sense of identity is. And that may cause a sense of sort of confusion about their identity, which means they never really feel good about themselves. Some have maybe been exposed to violence or some patterning that they've internalized. I mean, we can talk for the next 6 hours about possible causes. But essentially, my understanding is somebody's really become disconnected from themselves. So there's never a sense of, I feel good about myself, and that causes like a survival mechanism that develops. So we look for things, people, situations to make us feel better. And then my understanding of somebody abusing others or addiction is there's something that I am trying to do that either makes me feel in control or it helps me to relieve my pain, puts me in a better state, and there's a myriad of reasons why different people choose different things.
Let's look at the abuser. Why is he abusing children? Why is a man abusing his wife? Why is he violent and beats up on her? Why does he scream, rant, rave and shout? Why does a man go and abuse innocent young children sexually or otherwise? What's going wrong in that wicked, crooked, sick mind of his or hers to be perpetrating such actions?
Well, first of all, it's a pathology, it's a condition that develops in the person's mind. But I'm just reminded of a statement that we use in the NLP field particularly. All behavior is motivated by positive intent. All behavior.
How can that be possible?
Essentially, the motivation is to meet a need. There's nothing wrong with meeting a need.
But a sick need?
It could be a sick need, but the need in itself is there's nothing wrong with. Let's use the schoolyard bully. That's sort of less intimidating for people than talking about a sexual abuser. The schoolyard bully who hurts kids younger than himself, or herself for that matter. What could be the need there? The need for respect, the need for significance, the need for people looking up to me. Nothing wrong with that. But because they may have this poor sense of self-worth, the only way they can act on that is to pick on somebody weaker than themselves. So they feed this sense of power or their need for power, and that is where the problem comes in, how they go about it, how they execute that. But the need for significance and respect, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, what else could this bully do to experience that sense of significance and respect? Treat others with respect. But the pathology is, as Brett intimated, it becomes part of our personality. It becomes part of who we are, and our whole the person who has suffered abuse or whatever need they have that has been not been met, the whole view, perspective on life changes. And they go into survival mode. And they do what's in their minds, not the next best thing, the next necessary thing,
Sure.
to feel in control. We all have a basic human need for self-determination. Make my own choices, make my own decisions, and that then need for power and control. Power over my own life and being in control of my own life. And if that has not been met, this pathology develops. I need to exercise it over others. And that's where, just as you say, the sickness comes in, where people abuse others because it gives them a sense of control and power over that person.
Let's look at another aspect of this discussion. Obviously, young children, 5, 6 and 7, may not be able to make sense of protective messages that parents would give them. When they're older, how do parents, what is it that we say to our children to be careful and to try and move away from a situation of abuse or exploitation? What is it that we tell our children?
It's so difficult because very often the well-intended message is not really the right kind of message the child can understand.
What would you like to have heard when you were young?
Instead of, and again, I'm not trying to put anybody in a bad light, but I don't ever remember being told what I could do to protect myself. It never came up in our household. But Jenny coming back, what I personally would have needed to hear was more my own sense of worth. There's certain things I can say no to because it wouldn't feel right for me. Now, you might think how to explain that to a child, but a child has got that inner sense of this doesn't feel safe, this doesn't feel right, what they call a good touch or a bad touch. And if I have that kind of relationship with my child where I can install trust in them, make them feel safe, I can then sort of train them from that point of view. Anything that doesn't make you feel safe, anything that doesn't feel right for you, get away, ask for help, talk to somebody, if it makes sense what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
As opposed to teach them, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, because the child's brain doesn't relate to what they should not do, because they don't understand the dangers involved.
We've almost come to the end of the interview, believe it or not. Time flies, doesn't it? So, John, what can you say to our viewers to start looking at a brighter future? Regardless of what the situation is, they may have a loved one who's an addict or an abuser, or they're in a very, very abusive relationship, or they are abusing themselves. What is it that they should be doing to look towards a brighter future? And let's talk about New Year resolutions and positive affirmations.
Number one, support. Find support, the big S. Find somebody to talk to, anybody you feel comfortable with, or a professional, or find a support group that you can relate to that in that particular context. And then the other word that a lot of people don't like, which is the R word, responsibility. And it's always, what can I own where I'm now? Is there anything I can do? And that responsibility is to myself. I want to take back my life. Nobody else is going to do it for me. Even the support I may bring into my life, they're not going to do it for me. What can I do? And it's amazing when we start to ask those questions, what can I do? Not why. Why did this happen to me? Why don't I seem to be able to make a success? The victim mentality might sort of be triggered by that. But what can I do? How do I go about this? Starting with, I've got support and I want to take responsibility. I want to be able to move forward.
And that's where we leave it. Thank you indeed for sharing your story with us. No doubt you've touched millions of lives, and we do hope it's going to make a big difference in people's lives. And this is the beginning to people turning things around for themselves. Thank you indeed.
I appreciate that.
And time for us to wrap up our thought of the day, which is everything you want is on the other side of fear. A big thank you to the production team. Thank you for being with me till Wednesday at the same time. Go well, drive carefully, and it is Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Ali. يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا 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 هلا